Thank you. You know, Vermont is considered to be one of the most rural states in America. But as I drove here to Viroqua, I kind of think of Vermont now as a major urban center. This is beautiful, beautiful country that you live in. And let me thank Wyatt and Monica Sutherland for allowing us to use this beautiful facility. Foreign Fields for their music. Adam Kramer for his remarks, and Darren Van Ruden for the work that he is doing in agriculture. And especially Rebecca Cook, because we're going to need her in Washington. What I want to do is to say a few words, and we're going to open it up for your questions and comments, but I wanted to say a few words about where I perceive America to be today and where I think we should be going into the future. And what I will be telling you is something that you don't see very often in corporate media, and you're not going to be hearing much from senators and members of Congress. Right now, you are living in an oligarchic society. Now, I am told by some pundits that the American people don't know what oligarchy is. I think they do. I was, for better or worse, actually worse, kind of pushed into the front row when Donald Trump was inaugurated. I was sitting about where you are sitting. Not a pleasant experience. And as some of you may recall, right behind Trump, sitting behind Trump, were the three wealthiest guys in America, Mr. Musk, Mr. Bezos, Mr. Zuckerberg. And then sitting behind them were another 13 billionaires that Trump had nominated to serve as heads of major federal agencies. And as I was sitting there, I really did, I was reflecting on American history and reflecting that way back in 1863, as some of you will remember from your history books, Abraham Lincoln went to Gettysburg, and he was there a few days after that terrible battle where thousands of Union soldiers had died to put an end to the abomination of slavery. And Lincoln stood there and he wrote this speech very quickly, and he said, looking out on that field, we're just a few days before people had died by the thousands. And he said, you know, we have, I'm paraphrasing, we have a vision of government. And our vision of government that these men did not die in vain for is to establish and maintain a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And as I sat at Trump's inaugural and I looked around, what it was clear to me is today we have a government of the billionaire class, by the billionaire class, and for the billionaire class. And what I can tell you, as someone who has traveled all across this country, is the American people will not accept oligarchy. We will not accept kleptocracy. We will not accept authoritarianism. So that is what the struggle is about right now. In America today, and you don't hear too much about it, so let me tell you, you have more income and wealth inequality in America today than we have ever had in the history of America. You have today one person, our friend Mr. Musk, who owns more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. Now, you know, it's a funny thing, and this has a lot to do with who owns the media, what we get outraged about, what we get upset about, what we're allowed to get excited about, all right? If you step back for a moment and you say that in America in the year 2025, in the richest country in the history of the world, you got one guy owning more wealth than half the households of America, that is an outrage. That is unacceptable. That is not what this country is about. But it's not just one guy. You have the top 1% today, top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 93%. You got CEOs of large corporations making 350 times more than their workers. The people on top today and have never, ever in the history of this country had it so good. What's going on for the working families of America? The truth is, and this is again what I'm trying to get across, is that the media doesn't talk about it, and my colleagues in Congress, by and large, don't talk about it. You are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And yet, today, in Wisconsin, Vermont, all over this country, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. All right, I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck, lived in a rent-controlled apartment. Family didn't make much money. All over this country, here in Wisconsin, in Vermont, all over, people are struggling, trying to figure out how they're going to feed their kids, how they're going to pay the rent, how they're going to pay for health care. And maybe, dear God, will we have a few bucks saved for when we retire so we can live with a shred of dignity. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. 60% of our people should not be living paycheck to paycheck. And let us also be honest about it and acknowledge where we are. Essentially, our economic and political systems are broken in terms of the needs of the working class. Let me talk about our political system, and Becca touched on this for a moment. For the oligarchs, for the people on top, owning the economy is not enough. We have more concentration of ownership, impacts agriculture, impacts every aspect of our lives. You name the industry. A handful of large corporations own it. They control the prices that we pay and what happens to workers. But it is not just the economy that they control. That's not good enough for them. They now own the American corrupt political system. All right, I want you to think about it. Not too many people talk about it, but I want you to think about it and you decide in your own mind whether I'm right or I'm wrong. Ever since Citizens United, the worst decision the Supreme Court has ever made, what you have are billionaires with the freedom now to spend as much money as they want to elect their candidates they like, and defeat the candidates they don't like. In the last election, Elon Musk himself spent $270 million to help elect Trump. Does anybody vaguely think that this is what democracy is about? You have, it's not, and by the way, what happens when you donate $270 million to somebody's campaign? You get what you paid for. And Mr. Musk was appointed to run the United States government for 3 months, lay off thousands of federal employees, including 7,000 employees at the Social Security Administration, threaten his proposal was to lay off 80,000 employees at the Veterans Administration. Yeah, that's a real thank you to the men and women who put their lives on the line to defend this country. All right? And on and on. Thousands of workers, scientists who are helping us combat major diseases. So Musk got what he paid for. But what I want to say, it is not just the Republican Party. It is the Democratic Party as well. As some of you may know, I have helped lead in the Senate the effort to end all U.S. military aid to the Netanyahu government to stop the starvation of the children in Gaza. Now, I don't have to tell you what's going on in Gaza. Many of you know it. It's almost unspeakable, and it's just terrible. All right, we're talking about over 60,000 people who have been killed, mostly women and children and the elderly, over 140,000 wounded, including 18,000 children. What makes that war so despicable is that essentially U.S. taxpayers are funding it. And last I heard, the American people do not want to spend billions of dollars starving little children to death. Now, the good news is that in recent weeks and months, we have gotten more and more Democratic senators on board to say no more military aid to Netanyahu. But I will be honest with you and tell you that the reason we don't have any Republican support at this point, or not enough Democratic support, has to do with super PACs like AIPAC. The point is, if we want to live in a democratic society, we have got to get rid of this terrible Citizens United Supreme Court decision. We got to get rid of super PACs. You know, some of you may remember Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all others. It is messy. In this room, there are disagreements. But what every person here believes, and I believe most Republicans believe, that what this country is about, what people fought and died to maintain, is our right to disagree with each other, to run our own government. To understand that we live by the rule of law and that you don't always win. I have lost elections. I don't go around and say, oh, it's a fraud. I didn't lose. Sometimes you lose. That's what life is about. We live by the rule of law. That's what democracy is about. And we got to teach Donald Trump that lesson. All right, we're going to work hard to do our best every day to stop Trump's outrageous actions. But it is not good enough just to be against Donald Trump. We got to be for something. In my view, health care is a human right, not a privilege. And I want all of you to think hard. How does it happen in our great country where we have so many really smart, innovative people? We have all of this technology. Why do we remain the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child? Why are we spending, and this is an incredible fact, we are spending over $14,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country for health care. You got that? That's $56,000 for a family of 4. And yet we have 85 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. We have the lowest life expectancy of any major country on earth. And we have 60,000 people a year dying because they don't get to a doctor on time. So our view is not complicated. The goal of a healthcare system in a civilized democratic society is to provide care to all people in a cost-effective way. The ideas that I am talking about, that Becca is talking about, are not radical ideas. I know that the National Republicans will say, oh, these are radical fringe ideas. This is what the American people believe. But it's not just our healthcare system that is broken. And again, the richest country in the world is where you live. You tell me, think for a moment, why, when every psychologist who studies the issue understands that 0 through 4 are the most important years of intellectual and emotional development for a human being, right? We all know that. So I got politicians in Washington, they stand behind the flag and they, I love America, but somehow they do not love the children of America. Why in God's name are we giving $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%, and yet we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth? So when we talk about education, we're talking about living in a competitive global economy. We're talking about education as a human right. Again, not a radical idea to say that every child in this country should be able to go to a quality child care center at a cost that is affordable to their parents. Not a radical idea to say that our young people should know from their earlier stages that if they study hard, they can get a higher education regardless of their income, because we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Some people say, oh, making public colleges and universities tuition free. What a radical idea. Do you know that in the United States of America, 60, 70 years ago, major university systems like the City University System in New York, University System in California, and state colleges in Vermont and elsewhere were tuition free? It's not a radical idea to go back to where we were 60 or 70 years ago. It is not a radical idea to say that we should not be paying the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs so that 1 out of 4 Americans cannot afford the medicine that their doctors prescribe. It is not a radical idea, as Becca said, to end this absurdity in Washington where we have a starvation minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Let us make that minimum wage a living wage, at least $17 an hour. Not a radical idea to say that we should not remain one of a tiny number of countries around the world that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. You could tell a lot about where a country is at by how it treats its most vulnerable people. In this case, the elderly and the children. In America today, again, I keep saying this, the richest country in the history of the world, 22% of seniors are trying to survive on $15,000 a year. How does anybody survive on $15,000 a year, let alone a senior who has often has health problems? All right. Now, we got Republicans there in the Congress who think we should cut Social Security. Well, I've got a somewhat different idea. I think we should expand Social Security benefits. And it is not hard to know what to do. Right now, somebody makes $10 million a year, somebody makes $186,000 a year. They pay the same exact amount into the Social Security Trust Fund. If you lift that cap, scrap the cap, you can bring substantial sums of money into the Social Security Fund, raise benefits, and increase solvency. And what is certainly not a radical idea, because this is something that women have fought for generations. When you got people talking about freedom, well, to me, freedom means that it is women who control their own bodies, not the government. Okay. All right, let me just conclude by telling you what you already know. These are difficult times for our country. But what you also know is this is not the first time in American history that we have had to overcome crises. You know, going back from the American Revolution, and sometimes we forget about this, small group of people living in a colony stood up against the most powerful military force in the world, the British Empire. They beat them. We had people in the abolitionist movement in the 1840s with great courage taking on slavery. You know, we had workers fighting for workers' rights, taking on their bosses, getting shot down, getting jailed. We had women fighting for the right to vote and for other basic rights. We had the gay community standing up and demanding the right to love people who they wanted to love. So we have had to struggle. This country, that's what it is. If you want justice, Frederick Douglass, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing him, but basically what he said, freedom is never given to anybody. It's never given to you. You got to stand up and fight for it. And that's where we are right now. The bad news is we have a demagogue in the White House, somebody who does not believe in democracy, somebody who scapegoats people, tries to divide us up, which is really a very ugly thing to do. You know, to divide us, we're supposed to hate this group of people, we're supposed to hate that group of people, and then we lose our focus on what we should be doing. Instead of hating each other, let's come together and fight for an economy and a government that works for all of us. So the bad news is we have a demagogue as president, but I will tell you, again, from personal experience, just last night, we're in Davenport, Iowa, just, huge turnout all over this country. People demand and want a government that works for all of us and not just a few. They do not want, too many people in Wisconsin and Vermont fought and died to defend American democracy, and we're not going to let Trump or anybody else take that away from us. So We got a lot of work. We've got a lot of work on our hands, but I believe that on almost every major issue out there, the American people are with us. So let's stand up, let us fight back, let us create the kind of economy and government that the American people deserve. Thank you all very much. Thank you.